What is estimating? Definition: the process of predicting the resources, cost, and/or duration required to complete a project based on defined scope and assumptions, using available data and professional judgment. Explanation: estimating forecasts what it will take to finish the work, money, time, materials, and labor before it starts. Example: using historical unit costs per cubic yard to estimate the cost of placing 1,000 cubic yards of concrete. What is the role of the cost estimator? Definition: a professional responsible for developing estimates by collecting, analyzing, and applying cost data to a defined scope of work. Explanation: they ensure the project's budget is realistic, defensible, and traceable. Example: reviewing design drawings and site data to produce a Class 3 control estimate. What is budgeting? Definition: the process of allocating the approved cost estimate into planned expenditures over time to create a baseline for cost control. Explanation: budgeting turns an estimate into a spending plan. Example: spreading a $10 million project cost over 18 months to create a monthly spending profile. What is quantification? Definition: the process of measuring quantities of materials, labor, and equipment from project scope documentation. Explanation: it's counting and measuring before assigning costs. Example: determining that 15,000 linear feet of piping are needed from isometric drawings. What are the different classes of estimates? Definition: ACCE defines classes 5 to 1 from least to most defined scope with corresponding accuracy ranges and intended uses. Explanation: Class 5 is used for feasibility study. Class 1 is used for bidding. What is the difference between costing and pricing? Definition: costing, determining the actual resource cost to execute the work. Pricing, adding markups, overhead, profit, and risk to the cost to arrive at a selling price. Explanation: cost is internal. Price is what you charge. Example: $1,000 in materials plus $500 labor equals $1,500 cost. With 20% markup, price equals $1,800. What are the different types of parametric methodologies? Definition: methods that use statistical or mathematical models to relate cost to one or more scope parameters. Explanation: common types are capacity factor, cost-capacity equations, and regression-based CERs. Example: using dollars per square foot to estimate building cost based on floor area. What are codes of accounts and their use? Definition: a systematic coding structure for organizing and tracking cost and work elements in a project. Explanation: it's like a chart of accounts but for projects, ensures consistency in reporting. Example: code 2000 for site prep, 2100 for earthwork, 2200 for paving. What is building information modeling, BIM? Definition: a digital representation of physical and functional project characteristics, enabling integrated design, scheduling, and cost control. Explanation: it's 3D design linked with cost, 5D, and time, 4D. Example: extracting quantities directly from a BIM model to update the estimate. What are the fundamental considerations for internationalization? Definition: adjustments made when estimating or managing projects in international contexts. Explanation: consider currency exchange, local labor productivity, logistics, and cultural factors. Example: adjusting labor cost for a project in Qatar due to lower productivity in extreme heat. What is the difference between accuracy and contingency? Definition: accuracy, how close the estimate is expected to be to actual cost. Contingency, allowance in the estimate to cover known unknowns. Explanation: Accuracy is a measure, contingency is a cost item. Example: Class 3 accuracy plus or minus 15%, contingency $500K for design changes. What are cost estimating relationships, CERs? Definition: equations that relate cost to one or more measurable variables. Explanation: found using historical data and regression analysis. Example: cost equals 150 times weight in tons for steel structures. What are location factors? Definition: multipliers used to adjust base costs to reflect different geographic locations. Explanation: accounts for labor rates, materials, productivity differences. Example: a cost index of 1.15 for New York means costs are 15% higher than baseline city. What are life cycle costs? Definition: total cost of ownership over an asset's life, including acquisition, operation, maintenance, and disposal. Explanation: goes beyond just the capital cost. Example: buying an HVAC system includes purchase price plus 20 years of energy and maintenance. What are the differences between direct and indirect costs? Definition: direct, costs directly attributable to the project, materials, direct labor. Indirect, not directly tied to a specific work item, overhead, supervision. Explanation: direct is in the field, indirect is support costs. Example: concrete is direct, project manager salary is indirect. What is the difference between a hand factor and a laying factor? Definition: hand factor, labor productivity adjustment for work conditions. Laying factor, ratio used to estimate total installed cost from equipment cost. Explanation: hand is labor adjustment, laying is total plant cost estimate tool. Example: hand factor 1.2 for congested site, laying factor about 4.8 for process plant. What is the difference between a work package and an assembly? Definition: work package, a defined scope of work with schedule, resources, and cost. Assembly, group of components estimated together. Explanation: package is project control, assembly is estimating shortcut. Example: work package, install pump system, assembly, pump plus piping plus valves. What are the keys to cost and schedule integration? Definition: aligning the work breakdown structure, WBS, with cost accounts and schedule activities. Explanation: ensures consistent progress measurement and earned value. Example: activity, poor foundation, linked to cost account 2200. What are some of the challenges for change order estimating? Definition: issues such as incomplete scope, compressed time for estimating, and potential loss of productivity. Explanation: change orders often need quick turnaround and may occur under poor conditions. Example: adding added piping work while crews are already mobilized. What is the difference between a composite and an average crew rate? Definition: composite rate, weighted rate for a specific crew mix. Average rate, simple average without weighting. Explanation: composite accounts for labor distribution, average does not. Example: crew of 2 carpenters, $40 per hour, plus 1 laborer, $30 per hour, equals composite $36.67 per hour. What is the difference between bare rates and burdened rates? Definition: bare rate, base wage without add-ons. Burdened rate, wage plus taxes, benefits, and indirect costs. Explanation: burdened is the real labor cost. Example: bare $25 per hour, burdened $35 per hour. What is the difference between material unit price and material price? Definition: unit price, cost per unit, e.g., dollar per foot. Material price, total cost for required quantity. Explanation:
Unit times quantity equals total price. Example, pipe $5 per foot times 200 feet equals $1,000. What is the difference between unbalancing and front-end loading? Definition: unbalancing, adjusting unit prices to shift profit to specific pay items. Front-end loading, inflating early items to improve cash flow. Explanation: both manipulate pricing, but for different purposes. Example, higher mobilization price to recover costs early equals front-end loading. What are the different types of work breakdown structures, WBS, and use? Definition: organizational, deliverable-based, or phase-based hierarchies for defining work scope. Explanation: WBS is foundation.
What is the difference between unbalancing and front-end loading? Definition: unbalancing, adjusting unit prices to shift profit to specific pay items. Front-end loading, inflating early items to improve cash flow. Explanation: both manipulate pricing but for different purposes. Example, higher mobilization price to recover costs early equals front-end loading. What are the different types of work breakdown structures, WBS, and uses? Definition: organizational, deliverable-based, or phase-based hierarchies for defining work scope. Explanation: WBS is foundation for schedule and cost tracking. Example, level 1 equals project, level 2 equals building, level 3 equals electrical system. What is the difference between labor productivity and a labor productivity factor? Definition: labor productivity, output per labor hour. Productivity factor, adjustment applied to base productivity. Explanation: factor accounts for field conditions. Example, base equals 10 feet per hour, factor equals 0.8 for poor weather, adjusted equals 8 feet per hour. How does change order estimating differ from project estimating? Definition: change order estimating is for scope modifications during execution. Project estimating is for full project scope before start. Explanation: change orders often have tighter deadlines and less complete data. Example, adding a new line of piping mid-construction. What is the importance of project cash flow? Definition: timing and magnitude of project expenditures and receipts. Explanation: affects financing, interest, and contractor solvency. Example, front-loaded payment schedule improves contractors' liquidity. Cost estimate. Definition: a quantified assessment of probable cost based on defined scope and assumptions. Explanation: foundation for budgeting and cost control. Example, Class 3 estimate for 25 million wastewater treatment plant. Cost estimator. Definition: a professional who prepares cost estimates. Explanation: combines technical knowledge with cost data. Example, estimator producing bid price for a highway project. Quantification. Definition: measurement of work quantities. Explanation: step before costing. Example, measuring cubic yards of excavation. Costing. Definition: determining the cost of resources. Explanation: inputs for pricing. Example, calculating labor plus materials plus equipment for wall construction. Pricing. Definition: assigning a monetary value to a product or service, including cost and markups. Explanation: final amount charged to the customer. Example, cost equals $5,000, markup equals 15%, price equals $5,750. Scope definition. Definition: the degree to which the project scope is clearly and completely described. Explanation: drives estimate class and accuracy. Example, complete design drawings equals high scope definition. Assembly. Definition: a group of related components or items combined to perform a specific function within a project. Explanation: assemblies are higher-level groupings than individual parts, but smaller than a complete system, used in estimating to speed up quantity takeoffs and cost assignments.
Example, in building construction, a wall assembly might include studs, drywall, insulation, and paint as one unit cost. Capital O&M cost. Definition: capital costs are one-time expenses for acquiring or constructing assets. O&M costs are recurring expenses for running and maintaining them. Explanation: capital costs get the asset ready for use. O&M covers the life of the asset. Example, buying and installing a wind turbine, capital, versus paying for technicians and lubrication over its lifetime. Code of accounts. Definition: a systematic coding structure for categorizing project costs, resources, or activities. Explanation: it organizes cost data for tracking, reporting, and controlling. Example, code 1010 equals foundations, 1020 equals structural steel. Cost category. Definition: a high-level classification of costs according to their nature or purpose. Explanation: examples include labor, materials, equipment, overhead. Example, in a project budget, $500K labor, $300K materials, $100K equipment. Cost element. Definition: the smallest unit of cost within a cost category. Explanation: cost elements break categories down into specific items. Example, labor cost category, arrow, element, carpenter wages. Demolition cost. Definition: expenses associated with dismantling, removing, and disposing of existing structures or systems. Explanation: includes labor, equipment, permits, and disposal fees. Example, removing an old bridge before building a new one. Direct cost. Definition: costs directly attributable to a specific project, task, or product. Explanation: labor, materials, and equipment directly used in production. Example, concrete poured into a building foundation. Fixed cost. Definition: a cost that remains constant regardless of the level of output or activity. Explanation: doesn't fluctuate with work volume in the short term. Example, lease payments for a construction crane. Variable cost. Definition: a cost that changes in proportion to output or activity. Explanation: more production equals higher variable cost. Example, fuel for earth-moving equipment. Equipment costs. Definition: expenses for owning, leasing, operating, and maintaining equipment. Explanation: can be capital or purchase or operating fuel repairs. Example, rental fee for a bulldozer plus diesel costs. Indirect cost. Definition: cost not directly tied to a specific project output but necessary for the project's execution. Explanation: often includes overhead and administration. Example, office rent for project management staff. Labor costs. Definition: wages, benefits, and payroll taxes for personnel working on a project. Explanation: can be direct crew or indirect support staff. Example, hourly pay for welders. Material costs. Definition: the cost of raw or manufactured materials required for a project. Explanation: includes purchase price, taxes, and delivery. Example, steel beams for a warehouse. Salvage value. Definition: the estimated residual value of an asset at the end of its useful life. Explanation: used in life cycle costing and depreciation. Example, selling used scaffolding after project completion. Subcontractor costs. Definition: payments to outside firms for specific portions of work. Explanation: covers labor, materials, overhead, and profit of subcontractor. Example, hiring a roofing company to install a roof.
Suppliers. Definition: entities that provide goods, materials, or equipment to the project. Explanation: often distinct from subcontractors who also provide labor. Example, a lumber yard delivering wood to the site. Work breakdown structure analysis. Definition: the process of examining a WBS to ensure scope clarity and cost control. Explanation: breaks work into manageable, measurable parts. Example, reviewing a WBS to confirm each task has a cost code. Baseline. Definition: the approved plan for scope, cost, and schedule used for performance measurement. Explanation: acts as the reference point for tracking progress. Example: comparing actual spend to baseline budget. Certainty. Definition: the degree of confidence in data, forecasts, or outcomes. Explanation: higher certainty equals lower perceived risk. Example: using proven historical data increases estimate certainty. Contingency. Definition: funds set aside to cover known unknown risks in a project. Explanation: not for scope changes, but for inherent estimating uncertainty. Example: adding 10% to a budget for potential material price fluctuations. Cost estimating relationship, CER. Definition: a formula or model linking cost to one or more project parameters. Explanation: uses historical data to predict costs. Example: cost equals $500 times equipment weight, tons. Database. Definition: an organized collection of data for analysis and retrieval. Explanation: stores cost, productivity, and resource data. Example: RS means cost database. Decision analysis. Definition: a structured process for evaluating alternatives and risks to support decision-making. Explanation: often involves decision trees or simulations. Example: choosing between steel or concrete framing using cost-risk analysis. Deviation. Definition: the difference between actual and planned performance. Explanation: can be positive, ahead, or negative, behind. Example: actual cost equals 1.2 million, planned equals 1 million. Arrow, 200,000 deviation. Learning curve function. Definition: a mathematical model describing how productivity improves with experience. Explanation: more repetition means less time per unit. Example: labor hours drop by 20% after every production doubling. Life cycle costing. Definition: total cost of ownership over an asset's life. Explanation: includes acquisition, operation, maintenance, disposal. Example: choosing LED lights for lower lifetime cost despite higher purchase price. Most likely value. Definition: the single most probable outcome in an estimate or forecast. Explanation: central value in a probability distribution. Example: expecting $10 million total cost in a range of $9 to $12 million. Pareto's Law. Definition: the principle that 80% of outcomes result from 20% of causes. Explanation: helps prioritize focus on impactful factors. Example: 80% of project cost overruns come from 20% of issues. Profitability analysis. Definition: evaluation of a project's potential to generate profit. Explanation: uses metrics like ROI, NPV, IRR. Example: determining if a solar farm will achieve a 12% ROI. Risk analysis. Definition: identifying and evaluating project uncertainties and their impact. Explanation: can be qualitative or quantitative. Example: Monte Carlo simulation of cost overrun probability. Standard deviation. Definition: a statistical measure of variation from the mean. Explanation: lower SD means more consistent results. Example: labor productivity has an SD of 0.5 hours per unit. Value engineering. Definition: a systematic approach to improving value by optimizing function and cost. Explanation: seeks equal or better performance for less cost. Example:
switching to a prefabricated wall system to save labor. Variance. Definition: the difference between planned and actual results in cost or schedule. Explanation: similar to deviation, often used in earned value analysis. Example: schedule variance equals planned progress minus actual progress. Canons of ethics. Definition: principles guiding professional conduct in cost engineering. Explanation: includes honesty, fairness, and public responsibility. Example: refusing to inflate estimates for political reasons. Codes of accounts. Definition: C number 3, structured numbering system for organizing cost data. Example: 2010 equals electrical, 2020 equals plumbing. Constructability analysis. Definition: reviewing a design to ensure it can be built efficiently and cost-effectively. Explanation: looks for potential issues before construction begins. Example: identifying crane access problems in design stage. Deming cycle. Definition: a continuous improvement model, plan, do, check, act. Explanation: promotes iterative refinement. Example: revising cost control procedures after each project phase. Enterprise. Definition: a large organization or business entity. Explanation: could be a corporation, agency, or nonprofit. Example: Bechtel, a global engineering enterprise. Historical database. Definition: a repository of past project data for estimating and analysis. Explanation: improves accuracy of future estimates. Example: past bridge project costs per square meter. Mentoring. Definition: guidance provided by experienced professionals to less experienced colleagues. Explanation: builds skills and knowledge. Example: a senior estimator coaching a junior on WBS creation. Plan, do, check, act. Definition: same as Deming cycle, iterative process for quality and performance improvement. Example: adjusting estimating procedures after review. Strategic asset. Definition: a resource essential for achieving long-term organizational goals. Explanation: can be physical, human, or intellectual property. Example: a proprietary cost estimating software system. Cost estimator. Definition: a professional who prepares cost forecasts for a project. Explanation: uses historical data, current market information, and professional judgment to predict labor, material, and other costs. Example: preparing an estimate for a highway project based on past bridge construction costs. Scope. Definition: the detailed description of work to be performed and deliverables to be provided. Explanation: defines project boundaries and what is included or excluded. Example: scope for a water plant includes treatment system installation but excludes landscaping.
Quantification. Definition: the process of measuring quantities of materials, labor, and equipment required. Explanation: converts drawings and designs into measurable work items. Example: determining 500 cubic meters of concrete needed for a foundation. Costing. Definition: assigning monetary values to quantified resources. Explanation: calculates actual costs based on unit rates and quantities. Example: $2,000 per ton of steel multiplied by 100 tons is $200,000. Pricing. Definition: determining the amount to charge a client, including costs plus profit. Explanation: adds markup and sometimes strategic adjustments to base costs. Example: selling a $200,000 steel package for $220,000. Contingency. Definition: funds included in an estimate to cover known unknown risks. Explanation: based on risk assessment, not an arbitrary cushion. Example: adding 8% contingency for possible material price increases. Accuracy range. Definition: the allowable variation between estimated and actual costs. Explanation: expressed as plus-minus percentages depending on estimate classification. Example: Class 3 estimate with plus-minus 15% accuracy. Bid or tender estimate. Definition: a formal price proposal to perform work as per client's requirements. Explanation: prepared for competitive procurement and contract award. Example: submitting a $1.5 million bid to build a school. Budget estimate. Definition: the approved cost baseline for a project. Explanation: used for cost control and performance measurement. Example: allocating $50 million for a bridge project as the official budget. Concept study. Definition: preliminary analysis of project feasibility and alternatives. Explanation: evaluates technical, financial, and operational options. Example: comparing diesel versus electric buses for a transit system. Conceptual estimate. Definition: an early-stage cost estimate with limited scope definition. Explanation: often uses historical costs, factors, or parametric models. Example: $2,500 per meter squared for an office building before design starts. Confidence level. Definition: the probability that the actual cost will not exceed the estimate. Explanation: usually derived from risk analysis or simulation. Example: 85% confidence level for meeting the $10 million project budget. Confidence interval. Definition: a range of values in which the actual cost is expected to fall. Explanation: expressed with probability, often from probabilistic analysis. Example: project cost expected between $9.4 and $10.6 million at 90% confidence. Control estimate. Definition: the detailed estimate used as the cost baseline for execution. Explanation: compares planned versus actual costs during the project. Example: using a $4.2 million control estimate to track monthly expenditures. Cost estimating classification system. Definition: AACE's method of categorizing estimates from Class 5 to Class 1 based on scope maturity. Explanation: helps define expected accuracy and preparation effort. Example: Class 5 feasibility plus-minus 50%, Class 1 bid plus-minus 5%. Definitive estimate. Definition: a highly detailed, accurate cost estimate with fully defined scope. Explanation: based on completed engineering and vendor quotes. Example: a $25 million definitive estimate for a chemical plant with 95% design complete. Detailed unit costs. Definition: costs calculated per specific measurable unit. Explanation: multiplies a unit price by quantity. Example: $100 per cubic yard multiplied by 500 yards is $50,000. Deterministic. Detailed. Estimate based on fixed, known inputs without variability. Explanation: uses single-point values for all parameters. Example: $50 per hour multiplied by 200 hours is $10,000 labor cost. Feasibility. Definition: assessment of whether a project is viable technically and financially. Explanation: often precedes conceptual design. Example: determining if a site's soil can support a high-rise building. Order of magnitude, conceptual estimate. Definition: a rough estimate with accuracy around 50%. Explanation: used for early screening decisions. Example: $100 million plus-minus 50% for a proposed refinery. Parametric estimate. Definition: uses statistical relationships between key project parameters and cost. Explanation: often applied in early project phases. Example: $1,200 per meter squared to estimate a 10,000 meter squared warehouse is $12 million. Preparation effort. Definition: time and resources required to develop an estimate. Explanation: increases with scope definition and complexity. Example: Class 5 estimate takes 20 hours, Class 1 takes 300 hours. Probabilistic. Definition: uses probability distributions for uncertain inputs in estimating. Explanation: produces a range of potential costs instead of one number. Example: Monte Carlo simulation showing most costs between $8 and $9 million. Scaring. Definition: quick evaluation to decide if further study is justified. Explanation: compares rough costs to potential benefits. Example: rejecting an option costing $5 million that only returns $3 million value. Stochastic. Definition:
Incorporates randomness in cost forecasting. Explanation. Similar to probabilistic but emphasizes random variability. Example. Modeling unpredictable demand changes for a factory. Accuracy. Definition. Closeness of estimate to actual cost. Explanation. Determined by quality of data and scope definition. Example. Estimate 1 million, actual 1.02 million, 98% accurate. Allowance. Definition. A specific cost for an item known to be required but not fully detailed. Explanation. Different from contingency, it is planned for. Example. $25,000 allowance for signage in a building. Average. Definition. Sum of values divided by the count. Explanation. Used to smooth out variations. Example. 100 plus 120 plus 80 divided by 3 is 100. Cost estimating relationship, CER. Definition. A formula that relates cost to measurable parameters. Explanation. Based on statistical analysis of historical data. Example. Cost equals 500 times equipment weight to the 0.7. Escalation. Definition. Increasing cost over time due to inflation or market conditions. Explanation. Adjust costs for future price changes. Example. 3% annual escalation applied to labor rates. Known. Definition. An element of the project that is clearly identified and quantifiable. Explanation. Has no uncertainty in definition. Example. A confirmed purchase order for 100 pumps. Known unknown. Definition. A risk that is recognized but whose impact is uncertain. Explanation. Addressed with contingency. Example. Potential for steel price increases. Labor productivity. Definition. The output achieved per labor hour, measured in units per hour or hours per unit. Example. 10 meters of brickwork installed per mason per day. Learning curve. Definition. The tendency for unit costs to decrease as production experience increases. More repetition leads to efficiency gains. Example. Assembly time for each aircraft drops by 5% after each batch.
Location factor. Definition. A multiplier adjusting costs for geographic differences. Explanation. Accounts for local wages, materials, and productivity. Example. New York location factor 1.25. $1 million times 1.25 equals $1.25 million. Market value. Definition. The price a buyer is willing to pay in an open market. Explanation. Reflects demand, supply, and conditions. Example. Selling land for $200,000 based on recent sales in the area. Most likely value. Definition. The single cost outcome with the highest probability. Explanation. Often the peak of a probability distribution. Example. Among low, most likely, and high estimates, 90K, 100K, 120K, the most likely is 100K. Cost estimator. Definition. A professional who prepares cost forecasts for a project. Explanation. Uses historical data, current market information, and professional judgment to predict labor, materials, and other costs. Example. Preparing an estimate for a highway project based on past bridge construction costs. Scope. Definition. The detailed description of work to be performed and deliverables to be provided. Explanation. Defines project boundaries and what is included or excluded. Example. Scope for a water plant includes treatment system installation but excludes landscaping. Quantification. Definition. The process of measuring quantities of materials, labor, and equipment required. Explanation. Converts drawings and designs into measurable work items. Example. Determining 500 cubic meters of concrete needed for a foundation. Costing. Definition. Assigning monetary values to quantified resources. Explanation. Calculates actual costs based on unit rates and quantities. Example. $2,000 per ton times 100 tons of steel equals $200,000. Pricing. Definition. Determining the amount to charge a client including costs plus profit. Explanation. Adds markup and sometimes strategic adjustments to base costs. Example. Selling a $200,000 steel package for $220,000. Contingency. Definition. Funds included in an estimate to cover known unknown risks.
Explanation: based on risk assessment, not an arbitrary cushion. Example: adding 8% contingency for possible material price increases. Accuracy range. Definition: the allowable variation between estimated and actual costs. Explanation: expressed as plus-minus percentages depending on estimate classification. Example: Class 3 estimate, plus or minus 15% accuracy. Bid tender estimate. Definition: a formal price proposal to perform work as per client's requirements. Explanation: prepared for competitive procurement and contract award. Example: submitting a $1.5 million bid to build a school. Budget estimate. Definition: the approved cost baseline for a project. Explanation: used for cost control and performance measurement. Example: allocating $50 million for a bridge project as the official budget. Concept study. Definition: preliminary analysis of project feasibility and alternatives. Explanation: evaluates technical, financial, and operational options. Example: comparing diesel versus electric buses for a transit system. Conceptual estimate. Definition: an early-stage estimate with limited scope definition. Explanation: often uses historical costs, factors, or parametric models. Example: $2,500 per meter squared to estimate a 10,000 meter squared warehouse equals $12 million. Confidence level. Definition: the probability that the actual cost will not exceed the estimate. Explanation: usually derived from risk analysis or simulation. Example: 85% confidence level for meeting the $10 million project budget. Confidence interval. Definition: a range of values in which the actual cost is expected to fall. Explanation: expressed with probability, often from probabilistic analysis. Example: project cost expected between $9.4 million and $10.6 million at 90% confidence. Control estimate. Definition: the detailed estimate used as the cost baseline for execution. Explanation: compares planned versus actual costs during the project. Example: using a $4.2 million control estimate to track monthly expenditures. Cost estimating classification system. Definition: AACE's method of categorizing estimates from Class 5 to Class 1 based on scope maturity. Explanation: helps define expected accuracy and preparation effort. Example: Class 5, feasibility, plus or minus 50%, Class 1, bid, plus or minus 5%. Definitive estimate. Definition: a highly detailed, accurate estimate with fully defined scope. Explanation: based on completed engineering and vendor quotes. Example: a $25 million definitive estimate for a chemical plant with 95% design complete. Detailed unit costs. Definition: costs calculated per specific measurable unit. Explanation: multiplies a unit rate by quantity. Example: $100 per cubic yard times 500 yards equals $50,000. Deterministic detailed. Definition: estimate based on fixed known inputs without variability. Explanation: uses single point values for all parameters. Example: $50 per hour times 200 hours equals $10,000 labor cost. Feasibility. Definition: assessment of whether a project is viable technically and financially. Explanation: often precedes conceptual design. Example: determining if a site's soil can support a high-rise building. Order of magnitude conceptual estimate. Definition: a rough estimate with accuracy around plus or minus 50%. Explanation: used for early screening decisions. Example: $100 million plus or minus 50% for a proposed refinery. Parametric estimate. Definition: uses statistical relationships between key project parameters and cost. Explanation: often applied in early project phases. Example: $1,200 per meter squared to estimate a 10,000 meter squared warehouse equals $12 million. Preparation effort. Definition: time and resources required to develop an estimate. Explanation: increases with scope definition and complexity. Example: Class 5 estimate takes 20 hours, Class 1 takes 300 hours. Probabilistic. Definition: uses probability distributions for uncertain inputs in estimating. Explanation: produces a range of potential costs instead of one number. Example: Monte Carlo simulation showing most costs between $8 million and $9 million. Stochastic. Definition: incorporates randomness in cost forecasting. Explanation: similar to probabilistic but emphasizes random variability. Example: modeling unpredictable demand changes for a factory. Accuracy. Definition: closeness of estimate to actual cost. Explanation: determined by quality of data and scope definition. Example: estimate 1.0 million, actual 1.02 million, 98% accurate. Allowance. Definition: a specific cost for an item known to be required but not fully detailed. Explanation: different from contingency, it is planned for. Example: $25,000 allowance for signage in a building. Average. Definition: sum of values divided by count. Explanation: used to smooth out variations. Example: 100 plus 120 plus 80 divided by 3 equals 100. Cost estimating relationship. Definition: a formula that relates cost to measurable parameters. Explanation: based on statistical analysis of historical data. Example: 500 times equipment weight to the power of 0.7.
Escalation. Definition: increase in costs over time due to inflation or market conditions. Explanation: adjusts costs for future price changes. Example: 3% annual escalation applied to labor rates. Known. Definition: an element of the project that is clearly identified and quantifiable. Explanation: has no uncertainty in definition. Example: a confirmed purchase order for 100 pumps. Known unknown. Definition: a risk that is recognized but whose impact is uncertain. Explanation: addressed with contingency. Example: potential for steel price increases. Labor productivity. Definition: the output achieved per labor hour. Explanation: measured in units per hour or hours per unit. Example: 10 meters squared of brickwork installed per mason per day. Learning curve. Definition: the tendency for unit costs to decrease as production experience increases. Explanation: more repetition leads to efficiency gains. Example: assembly time for each aircraft drops by 5% after each batch. Location factor. Definition: a multiplier adjusting costs for geographic differences. Explanation: accounts for local wages, materials, and productivity. Example: New York location factor 1.25. $1 million times 1.25 equals $1.25 million. Market value. Definition: the price a buyer is willing to pay in an open market. Explanation: reflects demand, supply, and conditions. Example: selling land for $200,000 based on recent sales in the area. Most likely value. Definition: the single cost outcome with the highest probability. Explanation: often the peak of a probability distribution. Example: among low, most likely, and high estimates, 90K, 100K, and 120K, the most likely is 100K. Normal curve. Definition: a symmetrical bell-shaped distribution of data, where most values cluster around the mean. Explanation: used in estimating to model expected variation in costs, durations, or productivity. Example: labor hours for a repetitive task form a normal distribution, with most workers close to the average productivity. Pricing. Definition: the process of assigning a monetary value to goods, services, or work. Explanation: in estimating, it's the step after costing, where markups, profit, and adjustments are applied. Example: material cost is $10, labor $5, adding overhead and profit gives a selling price of $20. Project definition. Definition: the documented description of a project's scope, objectives, and requirements. Explanation: clarity here determines the accuracy of estimates and project success. For example, a project definition outlines that a building will be 10,000 square feet with specific finishes. Seasonal commodities. Definition: materials whose prices fluctuate with the time of year. Explanation: estimators must consider timing to avoid cost surprises. Example: asphalt prices spike in summer due to high demand and road construction. Risk. Definition: the potential for an event to occur that will impact project objectives. Explanation: can be positive, opportunity, or negative, threat. Example: material shortages delaying delivery is a negative risk. Unknown unknown. Definition: risks or issues that cannot be anticipated. Explanation: these require management reserves, not contingency. Example: a sudden regulatory change after project start. Weighted average. Definition: an average where each component is assigned a proportional weight. Explanation: useful when combining costs or rates with different significance. Example: a cruise rate is $40 per hour for 60% of time and $50 per hour for 40%, yielding $44 per hour weighted average. Acts of God. Definition: uncontrollable natural events impacting projects. Explanation: typically excluded from contractual obligations. Example: a hurricane damages a construction site. Allowance. Definition: a set amount included in an estimate for a specific purpose. Explanation: used when exact details are not yet defined. Example: $50,000 included for landscaping pending final design. Certainty. Definition: the degree of confidence in a forecast or estimate. Explanation: influenced by scope definition, data quality, and risk management. Example: a completed design gives high certainty in the estimate. Contingency. Definition: funds or time included in an estimate to cover known unknown risks. Explanation: based on risk analysis, not a catch-all for overruns. Example: 10% contingency for potential design changes. Dependent variable. Definition: a variable whose value depends on another variable. Explanation: in CERs, it's the output being predicted. Example: construction cost depends on square footage, independent. Dynamic risk. Definition: risks that change in nature or impact over time. Explanation: require ongoing monitoring and response updates. Example: currency exchange risk increases with political instability. Exposure. Definition: the potential impact of a risk event, often expressed in monetary terms. Explanation: combines probability and consequence. Example: a 20% chance of a $1 million loss means $200,000 exposure. Management reserve. Definition: budget set aside for unknown risks. Explanation: controlled by senior management, not part of baseline budget. Example: $500,000 held for unforeseen strategic risks. Mitigation. Definition: actions to reduce risk probability or impact. Explanation: preferred over simply accepting or transferring risk. Example: using dual suppliers to reduce supply disruption risk. Opportunity. Definition: a potential event with a positive impact on project objectives. Explanation: managed through exploitation, sharing, or enhancement. Example: a new technology could reduce labor costs by 15%. Pareto's law. Definition: 80% of effects come from 20% of causes. Explanation: helps focus on key cost drivers or risks. Example: 80% of cost overruns come from 20% of activities. Range. Definition: the spread between minimum and maximum expected outcomes. Explanation: shows uncertainty in estimates. Example: a cost estimate range of $5 million to $6 million. Range estimating. Definition: using a range instead of a single point for estimates. Explanation: reflects uncertainty and variability. Example: labor hours estimated at 800 to 1,000 hours. Risk management. Definition: the process of identifying, analyzing, and responding to project risks. Explanation: involves planning, monitoring, and controlling risks throughout the project. Example: creating a risk register with mitigation plans. Static risks. Definition: risks that remain constant over the project life. Explanation: do not change in likelihood or impact. Example: fixed tax rates affecting project costs. Strategic risk. Definition: risks affecting long-term organizational goals. Explanation: often external and broad in scope. Example: shifts in market demand affecting capital investment.
Tactical risk. Definition:
Risks affecting short-term project execution. Explanation: often internal and operational. Example: equipment breakdown delaying schedule. Threat. Definition: a potential event with a negative impact on project objectives. Explanation: managed through mitigation, transfer, or acceptance. Example: rising steel prices threatening budget. Algorithm. Definition: a step-by-step procedure for calculations. Explanation: used in estimating software or parametric models. Example: an algorithm calculates cost from area and unit rate. Capacity factor method. Definition: a cost estimating method using capacity scaling factors. Explanation: based on known costs of similar facilities of different sizes. Example: estimating a 200 MW plant cost from a known 100 MW plant. Cost estimating relationship, CER. Definition: a mathematical model linking cost to one or more parameters. Explanation: used for quick early-stage estimates. Example: pipeline cost equals $500,000 times length in miles. Escalation: anticipated increase in costs over time due to inflation or market conditions. Explanation: separate from contingency based on forecast indices. Example: adding 3% escalation per year for steel prices. End product units method. Definition: estimating based on units of final output. Explanation: simple method for repetitive products. Example: cost per house times number of houses. Factored estimate method. Definition: uses known costs of components multiplied by factors to estimate total. Explanation: often used in process industries. Example: total cost equals equipment cost times 4.0 factor. Hand factor. Labor adjustment factor for field installation. Explanation: accounts for difficulty in handling, fitting, or location. Example: welding in a cramped space has a hand factor of 1.3. Inflation. General rise in prices over time. Explanation: must be accounted for in long-term project estimates. Example: 2% inflation increases annual material costs. Lang factor. Multiplier applied to purchased equipment cost to estimate total installed cost. Explanation: varies by facility type. Example: chemical plant Lang factor approximately 4.7. Location factor. Adjustment for regional cost differences. Explanation: applies to labor, materials, and equipment costs. Example: New York factor 1.20 versus national average. Parameter. Definition: a measurable characteristic used in estimating models. Explanation: could be physical, performance, or cost data. Example: floor area is a parameter in building cost models. Parametric estimate. Estimate derived from statistical relationships between cost and parameters. Explanation: useful for early-stage estimates. Example: $200 per square foot times 50,000 square feet equals 10 million. Physical dimensions method. Estimating based on physical measurements like area, length, or volume. Explanation: often used for civil and architectural projects. Example: pavement cost per lane mile. Price index. Numerical measure of cost level relative to a base period. Explanation: used to adjust historical costs to current dollars. Example: using ENR Construction Cost Index to update 2015 costs to 2025. 6/10 rule. A cost scaling rule stating that cost varies approximately with capacity to the 0.6 power. Explanation: used in parametric estimating to predict cost for plants or equipment of different sizes. Example: if a plant with capacity of 200 units costs $2 million, a 400-unit plant might cost about 2 million times 400 divided by 200 to the 0.6 power, approximately $3.05 million. Account code structure. Definition: a systematic arrangement of codes used to classify project costs. Explanation:
helps track, report, and analyze costs consistently across a project. Example: code 03-120 might mean division 03, concrete, and line item 120, foundations. Account number. Definition: the specific numeric or alphanumeric code assigned to a cost item. Explanation: used within the account code structure for detailed tracking. Example: 03-120-A could refer to reinforced concrete foundation labor costs. Assets: tangible or intangible items with economic value owned by a company. Explanation: in projects, often refers to facilities, equipment, or intellectual property. Example: a completed chemical plant is an asset that generates revenue. Codes of account: hierarchical coding system for categorizing project costs and resources. Explanation: supports consistency in estimating, budgeting, and reporting. Example: code 04 equals masonry, 04.01 equals brickwork, 04.01.01 equals labor. Contract WBS: a work breakdown structure based on contractual deliverables. Explanation: used to align contractors' work scope with client agreements. Example: WBS Level 2, 2.3.4 might be electrical, lighting systems per the contract. Cost breakdown structure, CBS: a hierarchical structure categorizing project costs by type. Explanation: links costs to WBS elements for reporting and control. Example: materials, labor, equipment, subcontracts as Level 1 categories. Cost codes: short codes assigned to specific cost items for tracking. Explanation: useful for detailed field cost control. Example: EQ01 equals excavator rental. Organization breakdown structure, OBS: hierarchical representation of project team roles and responsibilities. Explanation: shows who is responsible for what in the project. Example: engineering division, mechanical department, HVAC lead. Stakeholder: any individual or group affected by or influencing the project. Explanation: includes owners, users, contractors, regulators, and community. Example: a city permitting office is a project stakeholder. Work breakdown structure, WBS: a hierarchical breakdown of project scope into manageable components. Explanation: used for planning, estimating, and tracking progress. Example: Level 1 equals building, Level 2 equals structure, Level 3 equals foundation. Benchmarking. Definition: comparing project metrics against industry best practices. Explanation: helps identify performance gaps. Example: comparing construction cost per square meter with similar projects. Escalation: increase in cost over time due to inflation or market changes. Explanation: applied in long-term estimates to reflect price trends. Example: adding 3% per year to steel prices. Location factors: adjustment factors for cost differences by geographic location. Explanation: accounts for local labor, materials, and regulation costs. Example: factor 1.15 for New York City compared to baseline costs in Houston.
Method of measurement. Definition: standardized rules for quantifying construction work. Explanation: ensures consistent takeoff and pricing. Example: concrete measured in cubic meters. Normalizing. Definition: adjusting data for consistent comparison. Explanation: removes differences in location, time, or currency. Example: converting all costs to 2025 USD in Houston, Texas. Productivity factors. Definition: metrics describing labor output efficiency. Explanation: used to adjust labor estimates. Example: factor 0.85 for less experienced crews. Unit cost. Definition: cost per unit of measurement. Explanation: basis for estimating total cost. Example: $500 per cubic meter of concrete. Unit hours. Definition: labor hours required per unit of work. Explanation: converts quantities to man-hours. Example: 2 hours per meter square of brickwork. Allowances. Definition: budget amounts for undefined but expected scope. Explanation: helps avoid scope disputes. Example: $50,000 allowance for landscaping.
Bidding documents. Definition: set of documents used to solicit contractor bids. Explanation: includes drawings, specifications, terms, and BOQ. Example: tender package for an office building. Basis of estimate. Definition: document explaining how the estimate was developed. Explanation: records assumptions, data sources, and methodology. Example: BOE stating steel prices based on June 2025 supplier quotes. Commissioning. Definition: process of starting up and testing systems before handover. Explanation: ensures systems function per design. Example: testing HVAC system for an office tower. Definition phase. Definition: project stage where scope and requirements are finalized. Explanation: often precedes detailed design and execution. Example: finalizing process flow diagrams for a refinery. Deming cycle, PDCA. Definition: continuous improvement cycle, PDCA. Plan, do, check, act. Explanation: improves quality and efficiency. Example: applying PDCA to improve cost estimation accuracy. Estimate class. Definition: category of estimate based on project definition and purpose. Explanation: ranges from Class 5 conceptual to Class 1 definitive. Example: Class 3 estimate used for budget authorization and a refinery project. Exclusions. Definition: items intentionally left out of the scope or estimate. Explanation: helps avoid scope disputes. Example: excluding site fencing from a warehouse project cost. Project lifecycle. Definition: the sequence of phases from initiation to closeout. Explanation: includes concept, design, execution, and closeout. Example: highway project lifecycle, feasibility, design, build, operate. Plan. Definition: a documented approach to achieving objectives. Explanation: can cover schedule, cost, quality, etc. Example: construction execution plan. Planning. Definition: process of defining objectives, scope, and methods. Explanation: a key project management function. Example: developing a procurement schedule. Planning session. Definition: meeting to establish project goals and plans. Explanation: involves stakeholders to align expectations. Example: kickoff workshop for a hospital project. Project definition. Definition: documented scope, requirements, and constraints. Explanation: serves as baseline for design and execution. Example: project charter for a data center. Project phases. Definition: distinct stages in the project lifecycle. Explanation: often concept, definition, execution, closeout. Example: design phase of a subway extension. Project plan. Definition: comprehensive document detailing how the project will be executed. Explanation: covers scope, cost, schedule, quality, risk, etc. Example: project management plan for a solar farm. Scope. Definition: the total work required to deliver a product or service. Explanation: defines boundaries of the project. Example: scope includes site grading but excludes landscaping. Scope definition. Definition: detailed description of project deliverables. Explanation: basis for estimates and execution. Example: scope definition for a bridge includes deck type, span, and materials. Startup. Definition: initial operation of systems after construction completion. Explanation: may overlap with commissioning. Example: first run of a manufacturing line. Work breakdown structure, WBS. Definition: hierarchical decomposition of the total scope into manageable components. Explanation: facilitates planning, estimating, scheduling, and control. Example: level 1 equals building, level 2 equals structural, level 3 equals foundations. Deterministic. Definition: estimating method assuming known fixed input values. Explanation: does not account for uncertainty, produces a single cost value. Example: calculating concrete cost using fixed unit rates and quantities. Development cost. Definition: costs incurred to design, engineer, and prepare a project for construction. Explanation: includes feasibility studies, design, permit, and approvals. Example: $500,000 spent on engineering drawings for a new plant. Estimate class. Definition: Category of estimate based on project definition and purpose. Explanation ranges from Class 5 conceptual to Class 1 definitive. Example, Class 3 estimate used for budget authorization and a refinery project. Maturity level. Definition, degree of project definition at the time of estimation. Explanation, higher maturity equals more accurate estimate. Example, conceptual design stage equals low maturity. Detailed engineering equals high maturity. Parametric model. Definition, estimating model based on relationships between cost and project parameters. Explanation, uses historical data to predict cost using scaling factors. Example, cost per square meter of office space times total floor area. Stochastic. Definition, estimating method that incorporates probability distributions for uncertain variables. Explanation, produces a range of possible outcomes instead of a single value. Example, Monte Carlo simulation for cost-risk analysis. Battery limit. Definition, boundary defining the scope of responsibility for a facility or project segment. Explanation, separates owner versus contractor scope. Example, pipeline tie-in point marking where contractor work ends. Bill of materials, BOM. Definition, detailed list of materials required for construction or fabrication. Explanation, basis for quantification, costing, and procurement. Example, steel beams, bolts, and concrete quantities for a bridge deck. Code of accounts. Definition, structured coding system for classifying costs. Explanation, ensures consistency for tracking, reporting, and analysis. Example, 05-100 equals structural steel fabrication. Cost category. Definition, classification of costs by nature or function. Explanation, used for budgeting, control, and reporting. Example, direct costs versus indirect costs. Cost codes. Definition, short alphanumeric codes assigned to cost items for tracking. Explanation, simplifies recording and analysis of project costs. Example, EQ01 equals excavator rental.
Estimate. Forecast of expected costs based on project scope and available data. Explanation. Forms the basis for budgets, bids, and financial planning. Example, $5 million estimated for a warehouse construction project. Estimate backup. Supporting documentation and calculations for an estimate. Explanation, provides transparency and traceability for review or audit. Example, detailed unit rates, quantities, and vendor quotes included in BOE. Facility, physical plant, building, or infrastructure under construction or operation. Explanation, basis for defining scope, cost, and schedule. Example, chemical processing plant or hospital building. Gross area, total floor area including walls, corridors, and unusable spaces. Explanation, used for high-level planning and parametric estimating. Example, 10,000 square meter gross area of a commercial building. Interference, physical conflict or overlap between systems or components. Explanation, must be resolved in design to avoid construction problems. Example, HVAC duct crossing plumbing pipes. Method of measurement, standardized rules for quantifying construction work. Explanation, ensures consistent takeoff and estimating. Example, concrete measured in cubic meters, steel in tons. Net area, usable floor area excluding walls, corridors, and service spaces. Explanation, basis for detailed costing or occupancy planning. Example, 8,000 square meter net usable area of an office floor. Procurement, process of acquiring materials, equipment, and services for a project. Explanation, includes sourcing, contracting, and delivery management. Example, ordering 500 tons of steel beams for a bridge. Quantification, process of measuring and counting materials, labor, and equipment required. Explanation, provides the basis for accurate cost estimating. Example, calculating 200 cubic meters of concrete for foundations. Quantity survey, measurement and valuation of construction quantities. Explanation, conducted by quantity surveyors to support cost estimates and contracts. Example, surveying wall, floor, and roof quantities for a hospital. Quantity surveyor, professional responsible for measurement, costing, and financial management of construction works.
Explanation: ensures accurate cost estimation, budgeting, and payment certification. Example: certifying monthly contractor payments based on measured work. Scope: total work required to deliver a project's output. Explanation: defines boundaries and deliverables. Example: installing foundations, structure, and roofing, but excluding interior decoration. Specifications: detailed description of materials, workmanship, and standards. Explanation: guides construction, procurement, and quality control. Example: concrete must meet ASTM C150 standard. Subcontract: contract to perform a portion of project work by another party. Explanation: allows specialization and resource optimization. Example: electrical subcontractor installs lighting systems. Takeoff: quantitative listing of materials and work items from drawings. Explanation: basis for cost estimating. Example: 500 meters squared of slab, 200 cubic meters of concrete, 100 tons of steel. Temporary construction: temporary facilities or structures needed during construction. Explanation: not part of final project, but necessary for execution. Example: scaffolding, site offices, and temporary access roads. Algorithm in WBS context. Definition: logical procedure or formula used to estimate costs or quantities. Explanation: helps automate calculations for repetitive elements. Example: labor hours equals unit quantity times productivity factor. Allowance: budgeted amount for undefined but anticipated work or costs. Explanation: provides flexibility in estimates. Example: $10,000 allowance for unforeseen site conditions. Bonds: financial instruments guaranteeing contract performance or payment. Explanation: protects owner against contractor default. Example: performance bond covering $1 million contract. Burden: indirect costs associated with labor such as insurance, taxes, or benefits. Explanation: added to direct labor costs to calculate total labor cost. Example: $25 per hour base wage plus $10 per hour burden equals $35 fully burdened labor cost. Commissioning: process of testing and validating systems before handover. Explanation: ensures systems meet design and functional requirements. Example: startup of HVAC system and verification of airflow rates. Construction cost: total cost incurred for construction of a facility. Explanation: includes labor, materials, equipment, and subcontractor costs. Example: $5 million for building foundation, structure, and roofing. Consumables: materials consumed during construction but not part of final structure. Explanation: includes items like welding rods, bolts, adhesives, and lubricants. Example: 50 kilograms of welding rods used during steel assembly. Cost: monetary value of resources required to complete a project task. Explanation: basis for estimating, budgeting, and controlling projects. Example: $500 per cubic meter for concrete. Cost codes: alphanumeric identifiers assigned to categorize costs. Explanation: used for cost tracking, reporting, and analysis. Example: EQ-01 equals excavator rental, MAT-02 equals materials concrete. Cost estimate: forecast of project costs based on scope, methods, and available data. Explanation: provides the basis for budgeting, bids, and financial planning. Example: $2.5 million estimated for the construction of a warehouse. Cost estimating: process of predicting the costs of resources needed for project completion. Explanation: involves quantification, unit costs, CERs, and contingency application. Example: estimating labor, materials, and equipment for a new office building. Cost estimating relationship, or CER: mathematical relationship between project parameters and cost. Uses historical data to estimate costs. Example: cost of piping equals $200 per meter times total meters installed. Cost estimator: professional responsible for developing cost estimates. Explanation: provides cost forecasts, evaluates risks, and supports budgeting and bidding. Example, preparing a Class 3 estimate for a refinery upgrade. Costing, assignment of costs to products, services, or project tasks. Explanation, determines total and unit costs for budgeting and pricing. Example, calculating the cost per meter squared of slab, including materials and labor. Daily crew output, quantity of work a crew completes per day. Explanation, used for labor planning and productivity analysis. Example, a 5-person crew installs 50 meters squared of flooring per day. Demurrage, charges for delays in handling materials or equipment beyond agreed time. Explanation, penalties due to idle equipment or shipping delays. Example, $1,000 per day for delayed crane rental. Development costs, costs incurred for project planning, design, and engineering. Explanation, includes studies, permits, and approvals. Example, $100,000 spent on preliminary site investigation. Distributables, costs allocated to project components or stakeholders. Explanation, helps in fair cost assignment across project segments. Example, shared site office expenses allocated to multiple contracts. General requirements, project-level overheads needed for execution but not part of final deliverable. Explanation, includes site management, temporary facilities, and safety measures. Example, $50,000 for scaffolding, fencing, and site office. General terms and conditions, standard contractual clauses governing project execution. Explanation, covers liability, payment terms, warranties, and dispute resolution. Example, payment due 30 days after invoice submission.
Home office cost. Definition, indirect costs incurred at corporate or administrative level. Explanation, includes salaries, utilities, and office operations not directly linked to site. Example, $20,000 per month for headquarters administrative support. Idle equipment cost. Definition, cost of equipment not in productive use. Explanation, occurs due to delays or lack of work. Example, crane sits idle for 3 days due to delayed foundation work. Indirect cost. Definition, costs not directly attributable to a single project activity. Explanation, includes overhead, G&A, insurance, and supervision. Example, site office utilities included as indirect cost. Insurance. Definition, financial protection against potential losses or damages. Explanation, covers project risks, such as property damage, liability, and workers' compensation. Example, builder's risk insurance costing $15,000 for the project. Labor. Definition, human effort required to execute project tasks. Explanation, measured in hours or crew output for estimating and scheduling. Example, 5 workers times 8 hours per day for 20 days equals 800 labor hours. Labor burden. Definition, additional costs on top of direct wages, taxes, benefits, and insurance. Explanation, represents total labor expense for project planning. Example, $25 per hour wage plus $10 per hour benefits equals $35 per hour burdened labor. Labor cost. Definition, total cost of labor including wages and burden. Explanation, used in estimating and cost control. Example, 800 labor hours times $35 per hour equals $28,000 total labor cost. Labor productivity. Definition, rate of work completed per unit of labor. Explanation, basis for scheduling and estimating manpower. Example, 10 meters squared of flooring installed per labor hour. Labor rate. Definition, cost per hour of labor. Explanation, can be straight wage or fully burdened rate. Example, $25 per hour standard rate, $35 per hour including burden. Open shop. Definition, workplace without union affiliation. Explanation, labor hired without union rules or agreements. Example, non-union subcontractor crew. Overhead. Definition, indirect costs associated with project management and administration. Explanation, added to direct costs to determine total project cost. Example, site office, utilities, and supervision costs. Small tools. Definition, portable tools required for construction tasks. Explanation, included in direct construction expenses. Example, hammers, drills, and trowels. Taxes. Definition, mandatory government charges on materials, labor, or services. Explanation, considered in total project cost and pricing. Example,
7% sales tax on construction materials. Union shop. Definition: workplace where labor is unionized. Explanation: labor must adhere to union rules and pay scales. Example: electrical subcontractor employing union electricians. Unit cost. Definition: cost per unit of measure. Example: per meter squared per ton. Explanation: used for estimating and pricing. Example: $150 per meter squared for concrete slab. Unit hours. Definition: labor hours required for unit of work. Explanation: basis for manpower planning and productivity analysis. Example: 0.5 labor hours per meter squared of tile. Wage rate. Definition: payment per hour to labor. Explanation: basis for labor cost calculations. Example: $25 per hour for carpenter. Contingency. Definition: budgeted allowance for unforeseen costs or risks. Explanation: protects against cost uncertainty. Example: 5% of project cost set aside for unknown site conditions. Contract. Types. Definition: agreement governing project work. Explanation: determines risk, pricing, and responsibilities. Example: lump sum, cost plus, unit price contract. Contract price. Definition: agreed price for project execution. Explanation: basis for payment and financial planning. Example: 1 million lump sum contract for bridge construction. Customer furnished equipment. Definition: equipment provided by the owner for installation. Explanation: reduces contractor procurement responsibility. Example: owner provides pumps and motors for a plant. Liquidated damages. Definition: pre-agreed financial penalty for project delays. Explanation: incentivizes timely completion. Example: $5,000 per day delay for late delivery of a bridge. General and administrative costs. G&A. Definition: corporate-level overhead costs not directly tied to project activities. Explanation: allocated to projects as part of indirect costs. Example: office rent, executive salaries, and legal fees. Inflation. Definition: increase in cost of materials, labor, or services over time. Explanation: escalation adjustment applied to future costs. Example: 3% per year escalation on steel prices. Learning curve. Definition: reduction in labor hours or cost as repetitive work is performed. Explanation: accounts for efficiency gains in production or construction. Example: second batch of 100 units takes 90% of the time compared to the first batch. Market value. Definition: price a project or asset would command in open market. Explanation: used in valuation, feasibility, and pricing. Example: land appraised at $1 million for a construction project. Net profit. Definition: revenue minus all costs and expenses. Explanation: measures actual financial gain. Example: $50,000 profit on $500,000 project. Price. Definition: amount charged for goods, services, or project. Explanation: basis for bid, contract, or sale. Example: $200 per meter squared for flooring installation. Pricing. Definition: process of setting price for products, services, or project. Explanation: includes cost, profit, risk, and market considerations. Example: bid price equals estimated cost plus 15% profit margin. Profit margin. Definition: percentage of profit relative to cost or revenue. Explanation: used for financial planning and competitive pricing. Example: $500,000 cost with $75,000 profit equals 15% margin. Sales price. Definition: final price offered to client or customer. Explanation: includes cost, profit, and allowances. Example: $525,000 quoted price for a construction contract. Uncertainty. Definition: degree to which actual costs or outcomes may vary from estimates. Explanation: managed via contingency and risk analysis. Example: soil conditions unknown may increase foundation costs. Bid bond. Definition: security guaranteeing that bidder will enter into contract if selected. Explanation: protects owner against bid withdrawal. Example: 5% bid bond required for a $1 million bridge project. Bid security. Same as bid bond, ensures bidder commitment. Prevents frivolous or non-serious bids. Example: certified check or bond submitted with bid. Bidding documents. Definition: compilation of drawings, specifications, and contract terms provided to bidders. Explanation: basis for preparing accurate bids and estimates. Example: full project drawings, specs, and terms for a commercial building tender. Bonds, contracts, and financial instruments. Performance bond. Definition: a surety bond guaranteeing contractor performance per contract. Explanation: protects the owner if the contractor fails to meet obligations. Example: $500,000 bond for completion of a bridge on time. Bonus or penalty. Definition: incentive or penalty applied based on performance relative to schedule or cost. Explanation: encourages early completion or discourages delays. Example: $10,000 bonus for early completion, $5,000 per day penalty for delays. Commissioning. Definition: process of testing and verifying systems before handover. Explanation: ensures facility operates per design intent. Example: HVAC systems tested for airflow and temperature performance.
Compound interest. Definition: interest calculated on principal plus accumulated interest. Explanation: used for financial planning, escalation, or investment evaluation. Example: $100,000 at 5% compounded annually grows to $105,000 after 1 year. Contract terms and types. Contract types. Definition: legal agreement specifying obligations, pricing, and risk allocation. Explanation: includes lump sum, cost plus, unit price, or time and materials contracts. Example: cost plus contract with 10% fee for a construction project. Contract documents. Definition: set of documents defining the contractual scope, obligations, and requirements. Explanation: includes drawings, specifications, general terms, and addenda. Example: drawings, specifications, and GTCs issued for a highway project. Liquidated damages. Definition: predetermined compensation for delay or breach of contract. Explanation: provides financial remedy for non-performance or late delivery. Example: $5,000 per day for late completion of a school building. Deflation. Definition: decrease in general price levels over time. Explanation: may reduce project costs, impacts financial and escalation planning. Example: steel cost drops 2% in a year, reducing material budget. Escalation. Definition: adjustment of project cost for inflation or market changes. Explanation: ensures budget reflects future cost increases. Example: 3% annual escalation applied to steel prices for a 2-year project. Escalator clause. Definition: contract term allowing price adjustment due to specified cost changes. Explanation: protects contractor or owner from market fluctuations. Example: steel price increases greater than 5% trigger contract price adjustment. Front-end loading. Definition: allocation of costs or resources disproportionately to early project stages. Explanation: can improve cash flow but may increase risk of unbalanced bid. Example: 40% of total cost assigned to the first 2 months of construction. Project requirements and terms. General requirements. Definition: project overheads necessary for execution but not part of deliverables. Explanation: includes site offices, temporary utilities, safety measures. Example: $50,000 for scaffolding, fencing, and temporary power. General terms and conditions. Definition: standard contract clauses governing rights, obligations, and processes. Explanation: includes warranties, liability, dispute resolution, and payment terms. Example: payment due 30 days after approved invoice. Inflation. Definition: increase in price of goods and services over time. Explanation: requires cost escalation planning. Example: 3% annual increase in concrete price considered in budget. Letter of credit. Definition:
Bank guarantee ensuring payment to a contractor or supplier. Explanation: provides financial security for contract execution. Example: $200,000 LC issued for imported equipment. Owner. Definition: entity funding or controlling the project. Explanation: responsible for defining scope, approving designs, and providing funding. Example: city government as owner of a new public library. Owner furnished fixtures and equipment. Definition: equipment or materials provided by the owner for installation. Explanation: reduces contractor procurement responsibility. Example: owner provides HVAC units and fire alarm systems. Payment bond. Definition: surety bond guaranteeing subcontractor and supplier payments. Explanation: protects subcontractors and suppliers if contractor fails to pay. Example: $300,000 bond for subcontractor payments. Qualifications and assumptions. Definition: statements clarifying conditions, limitations, or assumptions in estimates. Explanation: ensures transparency and accuracy in estimates. Example: assumes normal weather conditions, excludes unforeseen geotechnical issues. Risk drivers. Definition: factors that can significantly influence project risk. Explanation: helps prioritize risk mitigation and management. Example: remote site location increasing logistics risk. Unbalanced bid. Definition: bid with disproportionate cost allocation across project phases. Explanation: can create early cash flow advantage but may increase owner risk. Example: 70% of bid cost allocated to initial mobilization phase. Estimate accuracy and risk terms. Accuracy range. Definition: expected variance between estimate and actual cost. Explanation: helps in classifying estimate confidence. Example: plus or minus 15% for a Class 3 estimate. Confidence level. Definition: probability that actual cost will fall within estimated range. Explanation: used in probabilistic estimating. Example: 80% confidence level that cost will not exceed $1 million. Contingency. Definition: allowance for unknown costs or risk. Explanation: added to budget to cover uncertainty. Example: 5% contingency for unexpected site conditions. Force majeure. Definition: events beyond control, like natural disasters or strikes, affecting performance. Explanation: contract may allow schedule or cost adjustments. Example: flood delaying construction by 2 months. Management reserve. Definition: budget for unknown risks controlled by management. Explanation: not included in base estimate, controlled centrally. Example: $50,000 reserve for unforeseen design changes. Monte Carlo simulation. Definition: probabilistic technique for analyzing project cost or schedule uncertainty. Explanation: simulates multiple scenarios to estimate probability distribution. Example: simulating 1,000 cost outcomes for risk analysis. Opportunity. Definition: positive uncertainty or event that can improve project performance. Explanation: can lead to cost savings or schedule acceleration. Example: early delivery of materials reduces schedule by 1 month. Quantitative risk analysis. Definition: numerical evaluation of risk impact on cost, schedule, or scope. Explanation: supports decision-making and contingency planning. Example: calculating $50,000 potential cost increase from ground conditions. Range and range estimating. Definition:
estimating with upper and lower bounds to reflect uncertainty. Explanation: helps decision-makers understand potential variability. Example: estimate $900,000 to $1,100,000 for a building foundation. Risk. Definition: exposure to uncertainty impacting project objectives. Explanation: includes cost, schedule, quality, and safety risks. Example: labor strike increasing project cost by 5%. Stakeholders. Definition: individuals or organizations with interest in project outcomes. Explanation: include owners, contractors, regulators, and the public. Example: city government as owner of a new public library. Addenda. Definition: official modifications to bidding documents. Explanation: clarifies requirements or corrects errors before bidding. Example: revised drawings issued 2 weeks before bid submission. Backup. Estimate backup. Definition: supporting documentation justifying cost estimates. Explanation: ensures transparency and defensibility of estimates. Example: detailed labor takeoffs, material quotes, and subcontractor bids. Basis. Definition: underlying assumptions and data supporting an estimate. Explanation: used to validate and communicate estimate methodology. Example: historical productivity rates used as basis for labor estimates.
Subcontract. Definition: contract awarded by main contractor to third party for part of work. Explanation: transfers scope, responsibility, and risk. Example: electrical subcontractor hired to wire building. Procurement, scope, and contract terms. Supplier. Definition: an entity providing materials, equipment, or services to the project. Explanation: suppliers influence cost, schedule, and quality of construction. Example: a company supplying concrete for a bridge project. Change in scope. Definition: modification to the originally defined work or deliverables. Explanation: may increase or decrease project cost, schedule, or resources. Example: adding an extra floor to a building during construction. Cost index. Definition: numerical factor to adjust historical costs to current prices. Explanation: used for escalation and historical cost comparison. Example: multiplying 2015 cost by index 1.12 to reflect 2025 pricing. Code of accounts. Definition: structured system to categorize and track project costs. Explanation: links cost, schedule, and scope in WBS. Example: 01, 100, 200 represents site work, excavation, and grading. Design development. Definition: phase between conceptual and detailed design. Explanation: refines scope, materials, systems, and cost estimates. Example: finalizing HVAC specifications before procurement. Differing site conditions. Definition: physical conditions at the site differing from contract assumptions. Explanation: may cause cost and schedule adjustments. Example: unexpected rock layer requiring extra excavation. Escalation. Definition: adjustment to account for inflation or market changes over time. Explanation: ensures estimates reflect future costs accurately. Example: adding 3% per year for steel price increase. Omission. Definition: work or material accidentally left out of the estimate or bid. Explanation: can cause cost overruns if discovered during construction. Example: electrical conduits not included in initial bid takeoff. Pareto's Law. Definition: principle stating 80% of effects come from 20% of causes. Explanation: helps prioritize risk management and cost control. Example: 80% of delays caused by 20% of critical subcontractors. Procurement. Definition: process of acquiring materials, equipment, and services.
Explanation: impacts project schedule, quality, and cost. Example: ordering structural steel from certified suppliers. Variance. Definition: difference between planned and actual performance, cost, schedule, or scope. Explanation: used to track project performance. Example: actual cost $950,000 versus budget $900,000, variance $50,000. ____ pin. Work breakdown and estimating. Work breakdown structure, WBS. Definition: hierarchical decomposition of project scope into manageable units. Explanation: links cost, schedule, and responsibility. Example: WBS Level 1, building. WBS Level 2, foundation. WBS Level 3, excavation. Addendum. Definition: formal modification to bidding documents. Explanation: clarifies or corrects prior issued documents. Example: revised drawing issued to all bidders before bid submission. Allowances. Definition: estimated amounts for items not fully defined in the design. Explanation: provides budget flexibility for undefined work. Example: $50,000 allowance for landscaping design changes. Basis of estimate. Definition: documentation explaining the assumptions, methodology, and data used in estimate. Explanation: ensures transparency and repeatability. Example: labor productivity of 10 man-hours per cubic meter used for concrete estimate. Bidding documents. Definition: complete set of documents used for soliciting bids. Explanation: includes drawings, specifications, contract conditions, and addenda. Example: highway project bid package including all technical and legal documents. Contract documents. Definition: documents that legally define the contract. Explanation: establish obligations, scope, and pricing. Example: signed contract, drawings, specifications, and general conditions. Drawings. Definition: graphical representation of project scope and specifications. Explanation: basis for cost estimating, procurement, and construction. Example: architectural floor plans for a hospital. Estimate backup. Definition: supporting data used to validate cost estimate. Explanation: includes vendor quotes, historical data, label takeoffs. Example: subcontractor quotation sheets for electrical work. Contract conditions. Definition: specific provisions governing performance, payment, and risk allocation. Explanation: protects parties and ensures legal compliance. Example: delay penalties of $2,000 per day. Historic records. Definition: past project data used for benchmarking and estimating. Explanation: improves accuracy and confidence in estimates. Example: excavation productivity rates from previous highway projects. Labor productivity factor. Definition: adjustment applied to base labor rates to reflect real-world performance. Explanation: accounts for inefficiencies, skill levels, and site conditions. Example: 0.85 factor applied to theoretical productivity. ____ pin, estimating and risk management. Qualifications and assumptions. Definition: statements clarifying conditions and limitations of the estimate. Explanation: ensures transparency and reduces disputes. Example: assume normal weather and standard site access for crane operations. Risk analysis. Definition: assessment of potential events affecting project objectives. Explanation: identifies threats and opportunities to develop mitigation strategies. Example: Monte Carlo simulation to estimate probability of cost overrun. Subcontracts. Definition: contracts awarded by prime contractor to third parties for part of scope. Explanation: transfers responsibility and cost accountability. Example: electrical subcontractor hired for building wiring. Takeoff. Definition: Quantification of materials, labor, and equipment required for scope. Explanation. Basis for estimating and procurement. Example. 500 cubic meters of concrete identified from drawings. Validation. Definition. Process of confirming estimate accuracy and completeness. Explanation. Ensures estimate aligns with scope, methodology, and assumptions. Example. Cross-checking steel quantities against design drawings. Wage rates. Definition. Cost of labor per hour or per task. Explanation. Basis for labor cost calculations in estimating. Example. Electrician, $45 an hour. ____pin assumptions. Definition. Statements about conditions considered true for estimating purposes. Explanation. Provides consistency and clarifies scope boundaries. Example. Assume normal site access for crane operations. ____benchmarking. Definition. Comparing estimates or productivity against historical or industry standards. Explanation. Validates assumptions and identifies improvement opportunities. Example. Concrete productivity compared to past highway projects. Contingencies or containments. Definition. Allowances for unforeseen conditions or risks. Explanation. Reduces likelihood of cost overrun. Example. 5% contingency for unexpected soil conditions. Cost basis. Definition. Data or methodology used to calculate costs. Explanation. Ensures transparency and repeatability. Example. Historical unit rates used as cost basis. Design basis. Definition. Set of assumptions and requirements used to develop design and estimate. Explanation. Guides scope, materials, and cost decisions. Example. Concrete strength C30 for structural design. Estimate classification. Definition. Categorization of estimates based on purpose, accuracy, and methodology. Explanation. Guides confidence, contingency, and methodology selection. Example. Class 3 estimate ±15% accuracy for budget planning.
Estimate deliverables. Documents or outputs produced from the estimating process. Explanation. Used for approval, decision-making, or tender submission. Example. Cost estimate report with detailed BOE and backup. Estimate purpose. Reason for preparing the estimate, budgeting, bidding, or control. Explanation. Determines methodology, accuracy, and deliverables. Example. Budget estimate for project approval. Estimate quality assurance. Process to verify accuracy, completeness, and compliance of estimate. Reduces errors and improves reliability. Example. Peer review of takeoffs and assumptions. Estimating team. Group responsible for preparing and validating cost estimates. Includes cost engineers, quantity surveyors, and subject matter experts. Example. Team preparing cost estimate for a new refinery. Exceptions and exclusions. Items intentionally not included in estimate scope. Explanation. Provides clarity and reduces risk of disputes. Example. Excluding landscaping costs from base building estimate. Management reserve. Contingency controlled by management for unknown risks. Explanation. Allows flexibility for unforeseen conditions. Example. $100,000 reserved for design changes. Management summary. High-level overview of estimate, assumptions, risks, and recommendations. Communicates essential information to decision-makers. Example. One-page summary highlighting total project cost and major risk drivers. Methodology. Approach and techniques used to prepare an estimate. Ensures consistency and repeatability.
Life cycle and capital costs. Life cycle. Definition. Entire duration of a project or asset from conception to disposal. Explanation. Used for cost, value, and risk evaluation. Example. 30-year operational life of a water treatment plant. Life cycle costing. Definition. Total cost of ownership over the life cycle of an asset. Explanation. Includes design, construction, operation, maintenance, and disposal. Example. $10 million construction plus $2 million per year operation over 30 years equals total LCC. Life cycle cost method. Definition. Analytical approach to calculate LCC. Explanation. Considers all phases and discounted cash flows. Example. Present value analysis for solar plant over 25 years. Life cycle value analysis. Definition. Evaluates economic performance of alternatives over asset life. Explanation. Helps choose cost-effective and sustainable options. Example. Comparing two HVAC systems for 20-year cost and efficiency. Manufacturing cost. Definition. Cost incurred to produce a product. Explanation. Sum of direct materials, labor, and overhead. Example. $500 per chair, including wood, labor, and overhead. Present value. Definition. Current worth of future cash flows discounted at a given rate. Explanation. Allows comparison of investments or project alternatives. Example. $100,000 to be received in 5 years at 6% discount rate to PV $74,730. Production rate. Definition. Quantity of units produced per time period. Explanation. Basis for scheduling and labor costing. Example. 200 cubic meters of concrete poured per day. Raw materials. Definition. Basic unprocessed materials used in manufacturing. Explanation. Primary cost input for production. Example. Timber used in furniture production. Sales forecast. Definition. Projected revenue from products or services over a period. Explanation. Guides budgeting, procurement, and cash flow planning. Example. Forecasting $2 million revenue from product sales in Q1. Salvage value. Definition. Estimated residual value of an asset at end of life. Explanation. Reduces net LCC and depreciation. Example. $20,000 sale of old machinery at project end. Capital working. Definition. Funds used for long-term assets, capital, and short-term operations, working. Explanation. Critical for cash flow and project financing. Example. $3 million for machinery, capital, $500,000 for raw materials, working. Cash flow, payment, and project milestones. Cash flow net. Definition. Difference between cash inflows and outflows. Explanation. Indicates liquidity and financial health. Example. $1.2 million received minus $1 million spent equals $200,000 net cash flow. Defective. Material or work not meeting specifications. Explanation. May require rework or replacement affecting cost and schedule. Example. Cracked concrete beams needing replacement. General and administrative expenses, G&A. Definition. Indirect cost for company management and support. Explanation. Includes office rent, accounting, and executive salaries. Example. $10,000 month office rent allocated to project costs. General terms and conditions. Definition. Contractual provisions defining obligations, rights, and risk allocation. Explanation. Provides standard framework for project execution. Example. Liability and dispute resolution clauses. Interest rate. Definition. Cost of capital expressed as a percentage per period. Explanation. Used for discounted cash flow and financing calculations. Example. 8% per year interest on project loan. Letter of credit. Definition. Bank document guaranteeing payment to a supplier or contractor. Explanation. Mitigates payment risk in procurement or international projects. Example. Bank issues $500,000 LC to supplier of equipment. Markup. Definition. Amount added to cost to determine selling price or profit. Explanation. Covers overhead and desired profit margin. Example. $100 cost plus 20% markup equals $120 selling price. Maximum out-of-pocket cash. Definition. Peak cash requirement during project execution. Explanation. Ensure sufficient liquidity for uninterrupted work. Example. $2 million needed in month 3 to cover labor and material payments. Milestone payment. Definition. Payment tied to completion of specific project milestones. Explanation. Links cash flow to performance. Example. 20% payment upon foundation completion. Mobilization cost. Definition. Expenses for preparing site, moving equipment, and starting construction. Explanation. Usually front-loaded in project budget. Example. $50,000 to transport cranes and set up site offices. Progress milestones. Definition. Key points marking completion of project phases. Explanation. Basis for reporting, control, and payments. Example. Roof completion as 50% milestone. Remeasurement. Definition. Adjusting contract payment based on actual quantities installed. Explanation. Common and unit price contracts. Example.
10,500 meters squared paved versus estimated 10,000 meters squared. Adjust payment accordingly. Retention. Definition. Portion of payment withheld until project completion or satisfactory performance. Explanation. Protects owner against defects or delays. Example. 5% retention on all invoices until final inspection. S-curve. Definition. Graph showing cumulative cost, labor, or progress over time. Explanation. Helps visualize project performance and predict trends. Example. Steep slope in middle months indicates peak construction activity. Schedule of values. Definition. Detailed breakdown of contract price by work component. Explanation. Basis for progress billing and payments. Example. $200,000 for foundation, $300,000 for superstructure. Substantial completion. Definition. Stage when project is sufficiently complete for intended use. Explanation. Triggers final inspections, retention, release, and occupancy. Example. Building ready for tenancy except minor finishing items. Terms of payment. Definition. Conditions under which payments are made. Explanation. Specify schedule, method, and milestones for invoicing. Example. 30% upfront, 40% at mid-completion, and 30% at substantial completion. Project activities and scheduling. Activity. Definition. Specific task or work package required to complete a project. Explanation. Basis for scheduling, costing, and tracking progress. Example. Excavation of foundation for a building. Activity code. Definition. Unique identifier assigned to an activity for tracking and reporting. Explanation. Links activity to WBS, cost accounts, and resources. Example. ACT 101 equals foundation excavation. Activity cost. Definition. Total estimated cost to complete a specific activity. Includes labor, materials, equipment, and indirect costs. Example. $50,000 for foundation excavation, including machinery and labor. Code of accounts. Definition. Structured system to classify and track costs. Explanation. Provides hierarchy linking activities, WBS, and budgets. Example. 02150010 for structural steelworks. Contingency. Definition. Allowance for uncertain cost or risks. Explanation. Added to activity or project budget for unknowns. Example. 10% contingency on excavation costs for unforeseen soil conditions. Control. Process of monitoring and adjusting project activities and costs. Explanation. Ensures project stays on schedule and within budget. Example. Reassigning labor to critical activities to avoid delay. Control account. Management control point where scope, schedule, and cost are integrated. Explanation. Links WBS elements with earned value and performance measurement. Example. Structural steel erection control account includes all labor, materials, and equipment for that scope. Cost baseline. Definition. Approved time-phase budget used to measure performance. Explanation. Reference for earned value and project monitoring. Example. $1 million spread over 6 months for foundation work.
Cost loading. Assigning costs to scheduled activities. Necessary for earned value calculations. $10,000 labor and $5,000 equipment assigned to pour concrete activity. Critical path method, CPM. Scheduling technique to identify the longest sequence of dependent activities. Determines project duration and critical activities. Foundation excavation, concrete pour, structural steel erection. Earned Value Management, EVM. Methodology integrating scope, schedule, and cost to assess project performance. Compares planned versus actual progress to forecast trends. If 50% of excavation completed, but 60% of budget spent, indicates cost overrun. Hammock activity. Summary activity that spans multiple smaller activities. Used to report and monitor cumulative cost or duration. Site preparation hammock activity covering clearing, grading, and utilities installation. Network. Diagram showing logical sequence of project activities. Basis for CPM or PDM analysis. Nodes showing excavation precedes foundation pouring. Node. Point in a network representing start or finish of an activity. Connects activities in scheduling diagrams. Node 5 equals foundation excavation complete. Performance Measurement Baseline, PMB. Timed phased plan integrating scope, schedule, and budget. Basis for earned value comparison. PMB shows $500,000 allocated to complete excavation by week 4. Predecessence diagramming method,
PDM. Scheduling technique showing activity dependencies using nodes and arrows. Visualizes sequence, leads, lags, and relationships. Excavation, foundation pouring, structural steel erection. Planner, person responsible for developing and maintaining project schedule. Ensures activities are sequenced logically and resources allocated. Scheduling all site work for construction project. Resource, labor, equipment, or material used to perform activities. Basis for costing, scheduling, and productivity tracking. 3 excavators, 5 operators, 50 tons of steel. Resource code, identifier linking a resource to cost accounts or schedule activities. Facilitates cost loading and performance measurement. Resource 101 equals excavator operator. Work breakdown structure, WBS. Hierarchical decomposition of project scope into manageable components. Foundation for budgeting, scheduling, and control. Level 1, plant construction. Level 2, foundations. Level 3, excavation. Activity-based costing, ABC. Assigns costs to activities based on resource consumption. Provides more accurate cost allocation to products or services. Excavation consumes 10% of total site labor, cost assigned accordingly. Production and cost concepts. Direct production costs. Costs directly tied to production activities. Includes labor, materials, and equipment used directly on work. $30,000 for labor and $20,000 for concrete in foundation. Raw materials. Basic materials required for production. Direct input to construction or manufacturing processes. Steel beams, cement, and aggregates. Indirect costs. Costs not directly tied to specific activities but necessary for project. Includes field overhead, home office overhead, and G&A. Project site office rent, project management salaries. Distribution costs. Costs for transporting materials to site or clients. Part of total project or product cost. $5,000 to transport steel beams to construction site. Operating costs. Expenses required to operate facilities or equipment. Includes utilities, maintenance, and consumables. $2,000 per month for site electricity. Indirect production costs. Costs associated with production but not directly traceable. Includes supervision, quality control, and maintenance. Salary of site supervisor overseeing multiple crews. General and administrative costs. Overhead expenses for company management. Allocated to projects but not directly tied to production. Corporate accounting department salaries. International and procurement. Base camp. Central location for housing, storage, and logistics on site. Temporary offices and accommodations for remote construction project. Currency exchange rate. Rate at which one currency is converted to another. 1 USD equals 100 JPY. Currency hedge. Financial instrument to protect against currency fluctuation. Forward contract to lock USD/Euro rate for equipment purchase. Free on board, FOB. Shipping term where seller delivers goods on vessel. Buyer bears cost and risk after loading. FOB Shanghai means buyer pays for ocean freight to port. Freight, cost of transporting goods. $2,000 to ship steel beams.
Freight consolidation, combining multiple shipments to reduce costs. Merging 5 small shipments into one container. Holidays, non-working days affecting project schedule. Christmas and New Year causing no site work. Import duties and fees. Taxes applied to imported goods. 10% customs duty on imported machinery. Metric system. Standard units for measurement. Meters, kilograms, liters. Value-added tax, VAT. Consumption tax applied to goods and services. 15% VAT on construction materials. 3D models. Digital representation of physical dimensions of structures. Revit model showing building geometry. 4D models. 3D model integrated with project schedule. Construction sequence over time for foundation, walls, and roof. 5D models. 4D model with cost data integration. Material and labor cost linked to construction schedule. Assembly. Group of components combined into a single system. Precast concrete wall assembly with reinforcement and panels. BIM methodology. Structured process to develop and manage digital building information. Collaborative Revit workflow with architects, engineers, and contractors. Building information modeling, BIM. Process of creating intelligent 3D models with embedded information. Model containing geometry, material specifications, and cost estimates. Fees or profit. Compensation above direct and indirect costs for performing work. Represents contractors' earnings and risk premium. May be fixed or percentage-based. 10% profit applied on $500,000 construction cost equals $50,000 fee. Lost productivity. Reduction in expected work output due to inefficiencies, interruptions, or adverse conditions. Can be caused by weather, labor disputes, equipment downtime, or change orders. Affects schedule and cost. Crane breakdown delays steel erection by 3 days. Additional labor cost of $5,000. Rebaselining. Updating project schedule, budget, or scope baseline due to significant changes or deviations. Ensures performance measurement reflects current realities. Requires formal approval. After a major design change, project budget revised from $1 million to $1.2 million and schedule extended by 2 months. Stop work order. Official directive to suspend project activities temporarily or indefinitely.